Since before it gained statehood, Florida had a history of bloodshed and struggle. In the early half of the 19th century, the Seminole Wars raged throughout the state. So when Florida seceded from the Union in early 1861, Florida was preparing for yet another war. Florida was the third state to secede from the Union. The population was approximately 140,000, of which over 60,000 were black. Florida was considered a slave state, but the majority of black citizens were free men. This was because before the war started, Florida had been a safe haven for runaway slaves. But when the war commenced and the lines were drawn, Florida found itself on the wrong side of history. A majority of Florida at that point was populated by cattle ranchers and small farmers. Because almost half the state was black, it greatly limited the number of white soldiers available, so only an estimated 16,000 men were enlisted to fight in the war. Geographically speaking, Florida was the furthest southern state to participate in the war. Due to that fact, very little fighting happened in the state. There were really only 4 notable battles. The Battle of Fort Pickens. Union troops had been stationed at Fort Pickens before the war started, and after Florida joined the war, Florida sent over 1,000 troops to Fort Pickens to take it back from the Union. After a year of fighting, the Confederacy finally retreated, giving the Union a foothold in Florida for the rest of the war. The Tampa Naval Battle. Union troops opened fire on the port of Tampa, which was occupied by both Confederate soldiers and civilians. After a 2-day barrage, the Union troops pulled out of the port and no casualties were reported. The Battle of Olustee. This battle began following the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Union troops were advancing into Florida when they were attacked. The number of troops was almost even until several regiments of black soldiers joined the Union side. Unfortunately, even with their help, the Confederate troops were able to defeat the Union. In the 6-hour battle, over 3,000 men died, making it one of the bloodiest battles in the Civil War. The Battle of Natural Bridge. Outside of Tallahassee, Confederate troops were able to hold off advancing Union troops, protecting the state capital and making it one of the only Confederate state capitals this side of the Mississippi not to be captured during the war. Throughout the war, both the Union and the Confederacy suffered from food shortages, and soldiers survived on meager rations, so it came as no surprise that the cattle ranchers found themselves caught in the middle. Many cowboys wanted nothing to do with the war and chose to sell their beef to both sides until the Union troops started to conduct raids on their ranches and they found themselves thrust into the war. Most ranchers fought off Union troops strictly to protect their ranches, livestock, and salt production. Due to the fact that refrigeration wasn't yet invented, ranchers had to use salt to protect their meat from spoiling. Union troops started attacking the salt plants and the cow cavalry came to their defense. For the most part, these skirmishes were the only action Florida soldiers saw during the war.